Article 5, I think, is not in order here. Nobody's talking about Article 5. And the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant, and even more vigilant, if possible, since Saturday, because of the situation, of course, in the Middle East. So they see and know and sense that our military are on this.
NATO's impotence. The alliance will not invoke Article 5 after an Iranian ballistic missile strike on Turkey. We'll talk about this with Oleh Rybachuk, former Deputy Prime Minister for EU integration. Oleh, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. And, well, very dynamic world we are living in.
Yeah, it's true. Let's start with next news. NATO will not invoke Article 5 on collective defense after an Iranian ballistic missile strike on Turkey. Alliance Secretary General Mark Rutte said that in this case it would be inappropriate. If a ballistic missile strike on Turkey does not warrant invoking Article 5, what circumstances would? What message does this decision send to NATO allies regarding the reliability of Article 5 protections?
Well, Article 5 recently is under enormous test and pressure because we had a number of cases when NATO members found drones on their territory, missiles overflying their space. But every time, was it Poland or was it other NATO country like Turkey, the response is that this is not an open and deliberate attack on NATO member. This just happens as an incident because, for example, in case of Turkey, the missiles originally were planned to attack maybe Greek Cyprus or whatever, but that was not the purpose of Iran to attack a sovereign nation as Turkey is NATO member. And therefore, here is this explanation. I think sooner or later, NATO would be revaluing the Article 5 because it is now getting more and more questions. To what extent you can seriously take this? Russia will be probing it. Probably China may try to probe it. Clearly, Iran is now checking to what extent NATO alliance is there. Politically, Secretary General said that NATO will protect every square inch of territory of every NATO member. But we will see how things would be developing. The major explanation here is it was not an open, deliberate or massive, brutal attack against a member country. Therefore, there will be no Article 5 involved.
Dear viewers, share your thoughts in the comments. Why is NATO's Article 5 not effective? And at the same time, the armed forces of Iran claim they respect the sovereignty of Turkey and deny launching any missiles toward Turkish territory, according to a statement from Iran's general staff. This is sheer cynicism, we understand. An Iranian drone attacked Azerbaijan. Missiles and drones launched from Iran fell near the Nakhchivan airport. This is the first incident of its kind. The Azerbaijan Ministry of Defense stated that the attacks from Iran will not remain without a response. The ministry added that it is preparing certain measures. Could this incident escalate tensions between Iran and Azerbaijan into a broader military confrontation? What do you think about this incident?
I think that this is part of Iranian defense strategy. Iran clearly realizes that it is not able to defeat combined forces of US and Israel in direct confrontation. Therefore, I think Iranian authorities, maybe Ayatollah, supreme leader, left it in his death wish, so to say, guidelines how Iran would respond in case of invasion. Their strategy is to create havoc and chaos in the whole region by hitting neighboring country members of this region, allies of US, sometimes even not direct allies of US. They hit American bases, which is justified, but they also hit infrastructure, oil refineries, gas refineries. So the reason being, creating such a huge challenge for economic challenge, military challenge for the whole region, that US or Israel in this case would be forced to negotiate, would try to find a solution and not to continue military operation against Iran. This is Iranian strategy. Iran has number of risks here because countries which were rather friendly or at least neutral in relations to Iran at the beginning of this attack, now they are expressing, like Azerbaijani authorities, readiness to reply, to give a military response to attack on their territory. So by creating a global crisis, Iran hopes to preserve its regime, its system, and get the chance to negotiate. This is the strategy Iranians have chosen.
Oleg, and you mentioned China. According to Financial Times, the crisis in the Middle East could bring China and Russia even closer, as Beijing faces the risk of losing cheap supplies of Iranian oil and prolonged turbulence in global energy markets. How could a prolonged disruption of Iranian oil supplies affect China's energy security and economic stability? Would a loss of discounted Iranian crude push China to deepen its energy partnership with Russia?
Well, it's not only the way China may suffer from supply of oil from Iran, because it's like probably 25, I don't remember exactly, but this is quite substantial percentage of China oil imports is from Iran. But this is the fact that US, in this case with alliance in Israel, militarily attacked massively with the use of all their military power of the most modern weapons. And Iranian army, they had purchased lots of Chinese anti-air, for example, missiles and anti-air defenses. So that fact that practically in a couple of days, US and Israel, they completely control the airspace, and they neutralized anti-aircraft defense of Iran, is a quite troubling signal for China. So China is closely watching to what extent Western countries like NATO countries, or in this case US and Israel, how they can cope with large military structures which Iran has. Iran has really huge army. It's 90 million population, big territory, very strong fortification, lots of weapons hidden in under the earth. They use their territory, which has a lot of hills and caves. So they've been actually preparing for decades to open confrontation. So China is probably worried to see that there is obvious dominance of Western technology and Western weapons over Russian-made and China-made weapons. So China is probably reconsidering its plan to try and attack Taiwan, because Taiwan has the latest Western weapons. They've bought the latest anti-aircraft systems from US, from other Western countries. Therefore, for China, it is this is important. Obviously, we are waiting for the summit between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Both countries are preparing for this meeting, but at this point, China tries to play the reconciliatory role. They appeal to both countries to stop fighting and solve all the issues in diplomatic way. They believe that this is gross violation of international rule of law. We obviously, as Ukrainians, look at them and think why they are not making similar statements and urging strongly Russia to stop similar warfare in Ukraine, killing Ukrainian civilians and destroying Ukrainian infrastructure. But this is a separate story. At this point, China is interested in quick resumption of peace and trade because, as I said, roughly 30% of Chinese oil imports are from that region. Therefore, China would be interesting to find the peaceful solution here.
And, you remember Taiwan. We saw that, for example, the activity of the Chinese Air Force around Taiwan has sharply decreased in recent weeks. And last week, no flights were recorded at all. The sudden reduction in daily military maneuvers near the island may indicate that Beijing is reassessing its pressure policy toward Taipei, but we will see. More about Putin. The Kremlin stated that Russia has not received any request from Iran for assistance, including military aid. So what happened to the famous Russia-Iranian partnership?
I think it is an open lie that Iran has not requested for assistance. There were many news about Iranian requests for Russians to use air defense systems in Syria on Russian bases. And it is humiliating for Russia because Russia practically disconnected all their radar systems not to irritate or not to provoke Americans. So Russia is playing here a role of coward, not reliable partner for Iran. Before that, it was Venezuela. Before that, it was Syria. So Russia has a number of cases just clearly showing its impotence and non-ability to defend their partners. But Russia also, as a China, is very closely watching the way events develop in the Middle East with Iran, because Iran was the major partner or supplier of military equipment for Russia. Even if Russia has now Iranian technologies for Shahid, for example, for drone production, still they import like 30% or 20% of different spare parts for those Shahids from Iran, and missiles and ammunition. Russia tries to pretend that they are still an active player. It was in the news that Putin tried to call Trump, probably offering his intermediary assistance vis-a-vis Iran, but Trump refused to speak to Putin. So Russian propaganda is trying to say that Russia is actively looking for diplomatic solutions, that Russia's role in this conflict is important. Russia has a say, but this is not the case. Putin cannot pretend that he is not shocked by the very fact that the US and Israel, they didn't hesitate to attack very powerful country, which Iran was, with all its resources, military resources, a long history of militarizing this country. Iran was actually in the center of many terrorist networks, supported also by Russia. Now Iranians try to present this war as religious one, as Shiites versus Sunnite. So Shiites branch is a minority in Muslim community, but still they have large sections of true believers of this religion in Iraq, for example, and in other countries. Therefore, this conflict is getting international or multinational aspects, and Russia hopes that this war would be delayed, and the more fighting will go on, the more Russia would try to find the possibilities to weaken both Western alliance, US, Europe, by assisting Iran, by assisting such movements as Hezbollah or other terrorist organizations which have been supported since the Soviet Union was there. So Russia always tried to use any conflict to weaken democracy and to undermine security in the region. And they would try to use the momentum if the war would extend. But we heard today from US that they're already thinking about 100 days, not a week or two. And 100 days, this is too long. I think that it is in our interest, in Ukrainian interest, in European interest, in Chinese interest, for this war to be stopped, for Hormuz trade to be deblocked, because thousands of tankers are now blocked there, and restoration of trade in the world resumed, because this affects already our life, as we can see with prices for petrol in Ukraine.
And can we state that Russia, Putin in no hurry to save Iran, more concerned about oil prices?
Well, yeah, to some extent, Russia is now benefiting from this, because their prices for oil sharply rose. But experts in energy sector are saying that this can have a rather short effect. In long term, Russia is more losing than gaining. Yes, they can get a few extra bucks using the sharp increase in oil, but globally, there is no shortage of oil or gas in Europe or in the world. Other countries can compensate this. And if there would be changes in regime in Iran, Iran can get sanctions taken away, and they may be one of the largest oil producers in the region as well. So Russia only hope is that this war would prolong, and then it can get some bonuses. But overall, Russia is losing its reputation. Russia, again, is demonstrating that it is not a reliable partner, and that it has less and less role, and nobody would like to use Russia or talk to Putin in order to solve problems with countries which belongs to Russian sphere of influence, as it was the case with Syria, Venezuela, or nowadays with Iran.
And the United States and at least one other Gulf country are negotiating the purchase of Ukrainian interceptor drones for use in a potential conflict with Iran. It seems we have come to a point where Ukraine is helping the US control the skies, save the skies. What could Ukraine get in return?
Oh, that's irony, but this is true. They have officially, I've seen it on news, on many channels, that this is official request. And our president said that he was talking to leaders of Middle East countries yesterday. Many of them are looking for our drones to defeat Sahel, because U.S. Pentagon openly admitted that U.S. is not able to protect its own bases or territories against Sahel. The air defense system of U.S. is not constructed or targeted at hitting small flying objects as Shahed. Yes, they have more powerful anti-aircraft missiles, but that's stupid to try to shoot Shahed with Patriots, multi-million-dollar missiles, and Shahed with the cost of a few dozens of dollars. It depends. But let's say even $100,000, but that's uncomparable. Therefore, Ukrainian know-how now is certainly very demanding. Therefore, our experts have been saying that, for example, Middle East countries, they have so many Patriot missiles, like dozens of missiles, which are of no use because Iran is not able to attack them and is not attacking them with ballistic missiles, against which Patriots are very efficient. They send those rather cheap Shahid, and their system, defense system of Middle East countries is helpless. Therefore, the logic of our president was that we can provide not only anti-drones, but our know-how, our teams, our consultancy, and help, for example, cities like Dubai to be protected against drone. But in response, we would like to get some extra missiles, which are of no use at this moment in Middle East countries, but having lots of finances, they have purchased number of batteries, much more batteries than Ukraine has with missiles, and they have practically no anti-drone technologies, anti-drone systems. So here we can find this interest point. I hope that we will be able to find this understanding and to reach agreement, because it is clearly in the interest of Ukraine to have more anti-ballistic missiles, because Russia is hitting us with ballistic missiles, and we will be able and happy to help those countries with anti-drone defenses, where we have probably the best experience in the world.
And really, Ukraine could provide Middle Eastern countries with expert assistance, as you said, in countering Shahed drones in exchange for Patriot air defense missiles, and we're waiting for this. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that the next trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the United States, and Russia was planned for the period between March 5th and March 9th, depending on developments in the global situation. Could escalating tensions in other regions affect the willingness of the parties to engage in dialogue? What outcomes does Ukraine hope to achieve from this trilateral meeting, in your opinion?
Though when President Trump was directly asked to what extent his focus remains, or he still gives a priority to, or to what extent he keeps in his priority Ukraine, he says that this is on top of his priority list. I actually do not believe him, but still he has confirmed that it is not out of his radar. In reality, we understand that a lot will depend on the way how this operation of US-Israel against Iran will go on. If US would stop there, they are using lots of firepower, they lose lots of missiles, and already there is information that in a couple of days they practically used all their resources, and they have to deliver more weapons from US and from their stockpiles in the region. So most realistic scenario is that in the nearest days we will not be able to speak about any date of of the meeting, the all attention, with all respects to Trump's words that Ukraine is on his priority list. In reality, this is not the case. It is clear. We are trying to keep in touch diplomatically, but I think that Ukrainian side clearly realizes also that those negotiations are delayed. We have also another big question mark: to what extent those negotiations have any sense, keeping in mind that Moscow didn't change any attitude. Probably being in Kyiv, we noticed that maybe already a week there are no massive attacks on Kyiv. I look every day and night on the map where there are red zones in Ukraine, while they attack certain neighboring regions like Sumska, Chernihivska, but not Kyiv. Odessa suffers also. Maybe we hear also the news that all Russians are accumulating ballistics and drones, and there could be massive attack. But till this moment, looks that Russia is also taking a pause, and we don't know what happens there. But probably Russia doesn't want to irritate Americans and President Trump by another massive destructions in Ukrainian capital. I don't know, but clearly living in Kyiv, we feel that there is some pause.
Oleg, it is now important to emphasize that we're awaiting a prisoner of war exchange. We hope and believe that all our defenders and civilians will return home safely. Thank you so much for your professional and insightful contributions, your thoughts. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. I would like to remind that Oleg Rybachuk, former Deputy Prime Minister for EU integration, was with us today. Wishing everyone a productive day and looking forward to our next meeting. Thank you so much and see you.
Thank you.